Today we are going to explore one of humanity's oldest beverages, a golden elixir that connects civilizations separated by thousands of kilometers and thousands of years, and which holds in its sweet flavor the secrets of kings, gods, and warriors. Before continuing with the video, remember to subscribe to the channel for more documentary narratives like this one. There is a word that crosses cultures and languages, a word that evokes romance, sweetness, and new beginnings. Honeymoon. We pronounce this expression naturally when we talk about newly united couples, about that magical period that follows a wedding ceremony, but few stop to question its origin. Few wonder why exactly we combine the celestial image of the moon with the viscous sweetness of honey to describe this very special moment in the lives of two people. The answer to this question leads us on a journey through time, a trip that begins in medieval villages of Europe, where entire families gathered to celebrate the union of young couples. In those distant times when clocks did not yet exist and time was measured by the cycles of the moon, there was a peculiar custom that permeated matrimonial festivities. The relatives of the bride and groom prepared a special drink, fermented from bee honey, and gifted the couple with a sufficient quantity to last a full lunar cycle, approximately 30 days. This drink was called mead, and that period of daily consumption became known as the honeymoon, the month of honey, the time when the newlyweds drank together every night, hoping that the magic of that golden liquid would bring fertility and prosperity to their new marital life. Mead was not chosen by chance for this tradition. Since time immemorial, honey carried an aura of sacredness and power. Bees, creatures that seemed to emerge from nowhere to produce that golden and infinitely sweet substance, were seen by many cultures as messengers of the gods, beings that moved between the earthly world and the divine. And the honey they produced was considered a celestial gift, a boon that conferred special powers upon those who consumed it. When this honey was fermented with water and transformed into an alcoholic beverage, it was believed that its powers were amplified. Mead was seen as a natural aphrodisiac, a potion capable of awakening passion and ensuring the conception of healthy heirs. For societies where the continuity of the family lineage was a central concern, offering mead to newlyweds was much more than a gesture of courtesy. It was an investment in the future, a way to ensure that the new family would prosper and multiply. But the history of mead begins long before medieval European traditions. To truly understand this drink, we need to travel even further back in time, to a period when humanity was still taking its first steps in the art of transforming natural ingredients into something completely new. Mead is often considered the oldest alcoholic beverage known to human civilization, predating both beer and wine by thousands of years. Its simplicity is part of the explanation for this antiquity. While wine production requires the cultivation of grapes and beer demands the processing of grains, mead can arise almost spontaneously in nature. It is enough for wild honey to come into contact with rainwater and be exposed to natural yeasts present in the environment for the fermentation process to begin on its own. Some theories suggest that the first humans may have discovered mead more than 20,000 years ago, long before the emergence of agriculture or pottery. Imagine a group of hunter-gatherers finding an abandoned beehive in a hollow tree trunk. Rain had accumulated in that natural space, mixing with the residual honey left by the bees. As the days passed, yeasts present in the air and in the tree bark itself initiated a silent fermentation process. When those ancestral humans tasted the resulting liquid, they must have experienced something completely different from anything they knew. A drink that warmed the body, that altered perception, that brought a sense of euphoria and relaxation. It is not difficult to imagine that they attributed magical or divine properties to that accidental find. The oldest archaeological evidence of the intentional production of a fermented honey-based beverage was found in China, in the Neolithic village of Jiahu in Henan province. Chemical analyses of residues preserved in ceramic vessels revealed compounds associated with honey and the fermentation process, dating back approximately 7,000 years before the Common Era. In Europe, traces of mead were found in ceramics from the bell beaker culture, which flourished during the Bronze Age. Similar discoveries in Scotland and Germany suggest that mead was widely known long before the classical civilizations of the Mediterranean. When the Greeks emerged as a cultural power in the ancient world, mead already occupied a special place in their society. The Greeks called it hydromele and considered it a drink worthy of the gods themselves. Bees were seen as sacred creatures, messengers between Olympus and the world of mortals. The priestesses of several important goddesses received the title of Melissae, the Greek word for bee. The philosopher Aristotle wrote about the mead produced in Illyria, while the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder dedicated passages of his natural history to describing different types of mead. Pliny observed that the most esteemed mead was produced in Phrygia. The Roman writer Columella also left detailed recipes specifying quantities of honey and water, fermentation times and storage conditions. With the fall of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Middle Ages, the center of gravity for mead consumption shifted to Northern Europe. In the lands that today correspond to Great Britain, Ireland, Scandinavia, and Germany, mead found a home where it would be venerated like nowhere else in the ancient world. The explanation for this preference is partly geographical. In these regions of cold and humid climate, grapes did not grow well, making wine production difficult or impossible. Barley could be cultivated to make beer, but mead held a superior status, a drink reserved for special occasions and for the highest classes of society. Honey was a precious resource in these lands, and transforming it into an alcoholic beverage was seen as a way to honor and make the most of this gift from nature. Among the Celtic peoples of Great Britain and Ireland, mead occupied a central place in culture and mythology. The Welsh left poems that celebrate the drink with an almost religious passion. One of these poems, known as Canu i Med, or the Song of Mead, dates from approximately 550 years of the Common Era and describes mead as a pure and sparkling liquor, collected by bees, whose praise spreads everywhere. The author speaks of overflowing mead horns, of drinks that bubble and shimmer, creating a vivid image of the celebrations that took place in the courts of Welsh kings. Another Welsh poem, the Y Gododin, tells the story of a battle in which warriors fought under the influence of mead consumed the night before. Their high spirits, the poem says, shortened their life expectancy, a poetic reference to the fact that the hangover and excesses of the previous night may have compromised their performance on the battlefield. The Welsh language itself carries the marks of this deep connection with mead. The Welsh word for drunk is medwi, which literally means to be meaded, to be under the influence of mead. This linguistic curiosity reveals how much the drink was intertwined with the daily life and culture of these peoples. For the medieval Welsh, getting drunk and getting meaded were synonymous. Such was the predominance of this specific drink on occasions of celebration and alcohol consumption. When they wanted to create mead with medicinal properties, they added herbs and spices to the mixture, producing a variation known as mediglin, which means healing mead. This word eventually evolved into metheglin in English, a term still used today to describe meads flavored with herbs and spices. On the other side of the Irish Sea, the Irish maintained their own traditions related to mead. On the Hill of Tara, seat of the ancient High Kings of Ireland, there existed a great banquet hall known as Tech Mid Chuada, which can be translated as the house where the mead circulates. This evocative name allows us to imagine the scenes that unfolded there. Warriors and nobles sitting on long wooden benches, passing large vessels of mead from hand to hand, while bards sang stories of heroes and gods. The very act of sharing mead was an important social ritual, a way to reaffirm bonds of loyalty and belonging to the community. Refusing to drink when the vessel reached one's hands was considered a grave offense, while emptying one's portion with enthusiasm demonstrated respect for the host and companions. But it is perhaps in Anglo-Saxon literature that mead reaches its most memorable cultural expression. The epic poem Beowulf, written in Old English and set in 6th century Scandinavia, revolves around the great mead hall of Heorot. This hall, built by the Danish king Hrothgar, is described as a wonder of the world, a place where warriors gathered to drink, sing, and celebrate the victories of their lord. The name Heorot means hart or stag, an animal associated with royalty and virility in Germanic cultures. The hall was the beating heart of Hrothgar's kingdom, the place where he distributed treasures to his loyal followers and where the bonds of honor and service were renewed every night of celebration. The description of Heorot in Beowulf is extraordinarily vivid. The anonymous poet speaks of an imposing building ornamented with gold, whose splendor shone over many lands. It was a space where the light and heat of the fires contrasted with the darkness and cold of the outside world, a refuge where men could momentarily forget the dangers that surrounded them. Mead flowed freely in this welcoming environment, warming bodies and loosening tongues so that stories could be told and oaths could be made. For the Anglo-Saxon warriors who listened to this poem being recited in their own mead halls, the description of Heorot must have resonated deeply with their own experiences and aspirations. The central conflict of Beowulf arises precisely when this harmony of the mead hall is disturbed. The monster Grendel, a creature of darkness who inhabits the swamps on the outskirts of the kingdom, begins to attack Heorot during the night. The warriors who fall asleep after a night of drinking wake up to find their companions torn apart, victims of the monster's fury. The mead hall, which should be a place of safety and celebration, becomes a place of terror and death. This inversion is central to the emotional impact of the poem. Grendel is not just killing men, he is destroying the very concept of civilization and community that the mead hall represents. It is only with the arrival of the hero Beowulf, who faces and defeats the monster in single combat, that Heorot can be restored to its original function as the center of the social and political life of the kingdom. Modern archaeologists have sought physical evidence of the mead halls described in Beowulf. Discoveries at Yavering in English Northumbria reveal traces of an Anglo-Saxon palace complex dating from the late 6th century. The largest of the halls found measured approximately 11 meters wide by 25 meters long. In Denmark at Læsø near Roskilde, remains of a royal hall complex were found that many researchers believe to be the historical basis for the Heorot of Beowulf. The excavated halls date exactly from the period in which the poem is set. If Anglo-Saxon literature celebrated mead as the drink of kings and warriors, Norse mythology elevated this drink to an even more exalted level. For the Vikings and their Scandinavian ancestors, mead was not just a pleasant drink or a symbol of hospitality. It was a substance endowed with supernatural powers, capable of transforming ordinary men into inspired poets and wise knowers of all the mysteries of the universe. The story of how this magical mead came to exist is one of the most fascinating narratives in Norse mythology, involving gods, dwarves, giants, betrayal, and conquest. The story begins with the end of a war between two families of gods, the Aesir, warriors and rulers of Asgard, and the Vanir, deities associated with fertility and nature. After a long conflict, the two groups decided to make peace, and they sealed their agreement through a peculiar ritual. All the gods, from both sides, spat into a large cauldron, mixing their divine saliva into a single vessel. From this sacred liquid was born a being called Kvasir, a man or demigod endowed with incomparable wisdom. Kvasir knew the answer to any question he was asked, and he dedicated his existence to traveling the world, sharing his knowledge with everyone he met. His generosity and wisdom made him famous in all the 9 worlds of Norse cosmology. But Kvasir's story had a tragic end. 2 dwarves named Fjalar and Galar, envious of his wisdom or simply cruel by nature, invited Kvasir to their home, under the pretext of offering him hospitality. When Kvasir arrived, the dwarves killed him and drained his blood into 3 vessels, 2 large cauldrons called Sun and Bodden, and a kettle called Odrerir. They then mixed Kvasir's blood with honey, creating the mead of poetry, a drink that conferred upon whoever drank it all the wisdom and poetic skill that Kvasir had possessed in life. When the gods asked the dwarves what had happened to Kvasir, they lied shamelessly, saying that the wise man had suffocated in his own intelligence, as there was no one educated enough to ask him questions that would challenge him. The dwarves did not stop there in their sequence of crimes. Sometime later, they killed a giant named Gilling and his wife. The giant's son, Sutung, discovered what had happened and took revenge by capturing the dwarves and taking them to a rock that would be covered by the high tide. Facing imminent death, the dwarves begged for their lives and offered Sutung the mead of poetry as payment for his parents' blood. The giant accepted the deal and took the 3 vessels to his mountain fortress, a place called Hnitbjorg, where he tasked his daughter Gunnlod with guarding the precious liquid day and night. It is at this point that Odin, the father of all gods and lord of Asgard, enters the story. Odin was known for his relentless pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. He had sacrificed one of his eyes to drink from the well of Mimir and gain insight into the mysteries of the universe. He had hanged himself on the tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights to understand the secrets of the runes. When he learned of the existence of the mead of poetry, Odin decided he needed to possess it at any cost. He then devised a complex plan that demonstrated his legendary cunning. Odin disguised himself and went to work for Baugi, the brother of the giant Sutung. Through subtle manipulation, he caused Baugi's 9 workers to kill each other in a dispute, and then offered to do the work of all of them in exchange for a single sip of the mead guarded by Sutung. Baugi agreed, but when the time came to fulfill his part of the deal, Sutung refused to give up a single drop of his treasure. Odin then convinced Baugi to help him drill a tunnel into the mountain where the mead was stored. Transforming himself into a serpent, Odin crawled through the narrow tunnel until he reached the chamber where Gunnlod watched over the cauldrons. What happened next demonstrates that Odin was willing to use any means to achieve his goals. He seduced Gunnlod and spent 3 nights with her. In exchange for this time together, she agreed to allow him to take 3 sips of the mead. But the sips of a god are different from the sips of a mortal. With his first sip, Odin completely emptied the cauldron, Odre Rir. With the second, he emptied Sun, and with the third, he emptied Bodn. All the mead of poetry was now inside him. Odin then transformed into an eagle and flew toward Asgard, carrying his prize in his throat. Sutung discovered the betrayal and also transformed into an eagle, chasing Odin through the skies. It was a close race, with the giant gaining ground with every beat of his wings. When the other gods saw Odin approaching Asgard with Sutung right behind him, they quickly prepared vessels to receive the mead. Odin arrived just in time and regurgitated the precious liquid into the prepared cauldrons. But in his haste and fear of being caught, he let a few drops escape from the other end of his body, drops that fell upon Midgard, the world of humans. Anyone could drink of this wasted mead, but it only conferred mediocre abilities. Enough to make simple verses, but not to create truly inspired poetry. That is why the Norse said, there are so many bad poets in the world, people who drank from Odin's lost drops but never tasted the true mead. The mead that Odin managed to save was given to the gods, and to a few chosen mortals. To become a great poet or skald, as the bards were called in the Norse tradition, meant having received a portion of the mead of poetry directly from the hands of Odin. These skalds were figures of immense prestige in the courts of Scandinavian kings and jarls. Their words could confer immortal glory or eternal shame upon those they sang of. A poem of praise composed by a talented skald was a treasure more valuable than gold or weapons, for it guaranteed that the deeds of the honoree would be remembered as long as men told stories, and a poem of defamation could destroy a man's reputation as completely as a defeat in battle. This connection between mead and poetry was not just metaphorical or mythological. In the ritual practices of the Norse peoples, there existed a ceremony called symbol, during which participants passed a mead horn from hand to hand while making oaths, reciting poems, and honoring their ancestors and gods. Mead was considered a liminal substance, a liquid that facilitated communication between the world of the living and the world of the dead, between humans and the divine. Drinking mead during the symbol was not simply a social activity, it was a religious act that placed the participant in contact with forces greater than himself. The connection between mead and the afterlife also manifested in beliefs about Valhalla, Odin's great hall where warriors killed in battle were received. These chosen warriors, known as Einherjar, spent eternity fighting during the day and feasting during the night. And the drink they consumed at these eternal feasts was, naturally, mead. But not just any mead. The mead of Valhalla was produced by a magical goat called Hydrun, who grazed on the branches of the tree Yggdrasil and produced mead instead of milk. This image of the infinite abundance of mead in the warrior's paradise reflects the importance the drink had for these peoples and their hopes that the pleasures of earthly life would continue in the life after death. With the passing of centuries, however, mead began to lose its prominent position in European culture. Several factors contributed to this decline. Mead production depended on an abundant supply of honey, and honey was a finite and labor-intensive resource to obtain. As European forests were cleared to make way for crop fields, the habitat of wild bees diminished, making honey increasingly scarce and expensive. At the same time, the expansion of barley cultivation made beer a cheaper and more accessible alternative. Wine, imported from Mediterranean regions, became a status symbol among the upper classes, gradually replacing mead as the preferred drink of the nobility. The final blow came with the arrival of sugar from the Americas in the 17th century. Before this time, honey was the main sweetener available in Europe, and beekeeping was an economically important activity. But cane sugar was cheaper to produce in large quantities and easier to transport and store. As sugar replaced honey as the preferred sweetener, there was less incentive to maintain hives, and honey production decreased drastically. Without abundant honey, mead production became increasingly rare, until the drink went from a daily element of European life to a historical curiosity known primarily through ancient texts and isolated regional traditions. Some monasteries kept the art of producing mead alive during the centuries of decline. Monks, who often kept hives to produce wax for candles and honey for medicinal use, continued to ferment mead, both for their own consumption and for sale to the faithful. In England and Wales, in particular, the monastic tradition of mead production persisted until the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century. Even after that, some rural communities continued to produce mead in an artisanal way, preserving recipes and techniques that had been passed down from generation to generation since time immemorial. Mead also survived in some specific regions where local conditions favored its continuous production. In Ethiopia, a drink called tej, made from honey, fermented with a local herb called gesho, remained popular throughout the centuries and is considered the national drink of the country to this day. In Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe, regional traditions of mead production were kept alive, with different varieties being produced according to the ratio of honey to water and the aging times used. These local traditions served as repositories of knowledge that would allow for the rebirth of mead in more recent times. In recent decades, mead has experienced a notable resurgence. Craft producers all over the world have rediscovered the art of fermenting honey, experimenting with different types of honey, yeast varieties, and additions of fruits, spices, and herbs. Meaderies, as mead producers are called, have proliferated especially in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Scandinavian countries, attracting consumers interested in craft drinks and the stories behind their glasses. The craft beverage movement, with its emphasis on local ingredients, traditional methods, and unique flavors, found in mead a perfect candidate for revitalization. Popular culture has also played an important role in this renaissance. Television series such as Vikings and Game of Thrones, games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Skyrim, and the renewed fascination with medieval and Norse history and mythology have put mead back into the public consciousness. For many young consumers, trying mead is a way to connect with the fantastic worlds they admire on their screens and in their books, to literally taste a drink that their fictional heroes would have consumed. This emotional connection with ancient stories and traditions gives mead an aura of romanticism and authenticity that few other products can match. For those interested in trying mead, the home production process is accessible. The basic ingredients are only three: water, honey, and yeast. The traditional ratio is approximately 4 parts water to 1 part honey. The water is heated, the honey dissolved, and after cooling, the must receives yeast and ferments in an appropriate vessel. Fermentation time varies. Some short meads can be consumed after days or weeks, while others ferment for months and are aged for years. The addition of different ingredients creates variations with specific names. Melomel is mead made with fruit. Cider is made with apple juice. Piment combines mead with grape juice, and metheglin incorporates herbs and spices. The history of mead is, ultimately, the history of human civilization itself, in its quest for transcendence and connection. From the first humans who accidentally discovered the transformative power of fermented honey to the craft producers of today who rediscover and reinvent this millennial tradition, mead has served as a common thread through the ages. It is a drink that connects the mundane to the sacred, the individual to the communal, the present to the past. Every sip of mead is a sip of history, a small communion with the countless generations that came before us, and found in this golden liquid something worthy of celebration, veneration, and sharing. When a modern couple sets off on their honeymoon, they probably do not think about the medieval roots of this tradition. They do not imagine the newlyweds of centuries past sitting in their simple homes drinking together the mead gifted by their families, while they hoped that the magic of that drink would bring them healthy children and a prosperous life. But the connection is there, preserved in the very language we use to describe this special period. Mead may have disappeared from most modern wedding celebrations, but its legacy persists, remembered every time we pronounce the word honeymoon without thinking of its original meaning. And so, we reach the end of our journey through time and space, a journey that has taken us from Neolithic villages in ancient China to the mead halls of Anglo-Saxon kings, from the mountains of Norse mythology to the wedding festivals of medieval Europe. Mead emerges from this journey not as a simple alcoholic beverage, but as a powerful symbol of human creativity, of the search for meaning, and of the ability to find the extraordinary in the most basic elements of nature. Water, honey, and time, simple ingredients that, combined with knowledge and patience, produce something truly magical. If this narrative has awakened in you the curiosity to know more about mead, its history and its traditions, consider this an invitation to continue exploring. History is full of fascinating details that could not be included in this presentation, and the modern world offers ever greater opportunities to experience this ancestral drink in all its variations. Whether by visiting a local meadery, trying to make your own mead at home, or simply raising a glass in honor of the traditions that brought us here, there are many ways to participate in this ongoing story that connects past, present, and future through the simple act of fermenting honey. And now, a final word for you who have accompanied us this far on this journey through the world of mead. If this documentary has touched your curiosity, if it has awakened in you the desire to know more stories like this one, we have a special request. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes, where we will explore other fascinating chapters of human history. Leave your like if this content has enriched your day, and share in the comments your impressions, your questions, your own stories related to the topic. Every comment, every subscription, every like helps us to continue producing quality content and to reach more people passionate about discovering the secrets that the past holds. Just as mead was shared from hand to hand in medieval halls, strengthening bonds and creating community, your participation strengthens our community of curious people and history lovers. Until the next journey.